Alright, yeah, okay. Alright, sure, I get it. But let's be real here, folks. Let's be real. True Blood is okay. But fucking Fairy Blood? That's some fucking top tier, fucking high quality shit right here. I mean, like, look at this. This is fucking good. This is some really good fucking blood. Hello everybody, John12 back here again with another video, and I'm back with another Halloween season TV show binging. I really don't know what to call this segment, but it's come to a close, seeing as how I'm at the end of the last TV series I'm here to review, which is of course True Blood. Yes, I started off with Dexter when the 10th anniversary came out this October, and I decided to use that as kind of like a platform for TV show reviews I wanted to do based around the Halloween fall season. And I did one for, of course, Dexter, American Horror Story Murder House, and Stranger Things, and now I'm ending it off with True Blood, and it's been a very interesting ride. I think some of the videos came out pretty decent for the sake of when I recorded them and filmed them, but for the sake of future reviews around this time that I wish I could have gotten done, whether it be movies or other TV shows, then I guess the only thing I can really say is, well, there's always next year, which of course I'll get into maybe in the later half of this review. But with that being said and done, let's get into this review, which of course is going to be my official review for True Blood. Now, of course, if you've not seen the official series of True Blood, which ran for 7 seasons, please go check it out because this review will contain spoilers. But that being said, now of course this is my review for the TV series, the HBO TV series, True Blood, which was created by Alan Ball, based on novels by Charlene Harris, and of course starred Anna Paquin, Stephen Moyer, Alexander Skarsgård, Ryan Quanten, Rutina Wesley, Deborah Ann Wool, and Joe Manganiello, and of course a packed house of multiple character actors that are way too much for me to name at this point in time in this review, but a whole bunch of awesomeness. And of course, the overall story of True Blood is essentially, it takes place in a small town of Louisiana and centers around a waitress character called Suki Stackhouse. And Suki Stackhouse is a waitress with supernatural abilities. She falls in love and has an affair with various vampires, and her friends and family go on adventures throughout the supernatural realm, stopping vampires, werewolves, werepeople, shapeshifter characters, and a whole bunch of other vampires to, I guess, save little Louisiana. Now, with that being said, let's get into True Blood. Overall, I can definitely say that when it comes down to True Blood, I very much like my Dexter review. I can't really speak upon the novels and stories that were told within the novels by author Harris. So, of course, within this review, I'm going to be discussing specifically just the TV series, what happened within the TV series, and no real connections with the novels themselves. And that has a lot to do with the fact that I never read them, very similar to my Dexter review, which is very interesting because I am particularly very nitpicky when it comes to things like uses of sex and period pieces and, of course, novelizations and their connections when it comes to adaptations and what have you. I'm very nitpicky when it comes to those areas, and True Blood is essentially the definition of a show I probably shouldn't like because of those reasons. However, I do, so it's a very interesting case. Now, when it comes down to HBO and their run, they have created a slew of freaking gigantic catalog of phenomenal TV series, and there's definitely a defined line when it comes to HBO's catalog where you have very iconic classic TV series. You have stuff like Game of Thrones, The Sopranos, The Wire, for fuck's sake, and then you have very horrendous, very nonsensical nonsense that HBO developed or bought off on through the years. And True Blood, I can definitely say, is somewhere down in the middle when it comes down to all these various shows in HBO's grand catalog. And I was never really a big fan of HBO's True Blood, seeing as how I never really watched it up until recently. It was a show that definitely ran for practically a decade, and I never really got into it. It True Blood came out in a very specific era, which I guess is still kind of this era, granted. And over the course of the decade that it was developed, it was centered around when the Hollywood train was really obsessed with developing very base stories, sometimes adapted by various novels, and centered around stories where you had a very simplistic female lead, and who was possibly beautiful, and had a male vampire and/or werewolf love triangle, and then various adventures and mysteries ensue within said love triangle. And True Blood defines that. It's very much just the Twilight, the Vampire Diaries, and everything in between in that specific subgenre of mystery, horror, romance. And for me personally, I was never really a huge fan of that, but I really wanted to get into various other shows in HBO's catalog. I love The Wire, love Sopranos. We all know these shows, but there's tons of other things that they've done over the years. And for a show that HBO bought and continued to run for 7 freaking seasons, it makes you interested as to what was this show all about. So I went in, I checked out the entire series, and my mind is now baffled with what True Blood essentially is. True Blood is essentially a DeviantArt or Tumblr fangirls fanfiction brought to life. It's essentially the Scooby-Doo mystery adventures mixed in with vampires, really sexy male and female actors having sex. And please keep in mind, there's a lot of sex. There is so much fan service, this show doesn't even know how to handle. I mean, like, this show shouldn't have been called True Blood, it should have just been called fan service, because there's man-ass, lots of tits, lots of bush. There's not really any penises, if I recall, back with the 7 seasons that I saw. But there was definitely a lot of sex, there was a lot of naked actors, and there was a lot of really good-looking actors and actresses banging each other. And, of course, the show was very bent on, what adventure are we on now? It was more or less, who's Sookie Stackhouse, Anna Paquin's characters fucking this week? And that's essentially what the show kind of ended off on. And that's kind of like one of the things that definitely brought me in a divisive gray area with the series. Now, overall, the show, if I have to go off on the positives quickly, it definitely has to be the characters, the very side characters especially, because when it comes to performances, even with the most cheesiest or more, I guess you can say, just horrendous shows, there are performances in there that you can find that are, hey, yeah, that is cheesy, that is very just like, who really wrote that? But it really works for this series, and a lot of that has to do with the actors. There's so many grand actors, and they're all great. I mean, like, every single person, Stephen Moyer and Anna Paquin's chemistry obviously worked out in real life, and it definitely works out on the screen, and their relationship, every other relationship the character Anna Paquin has, definitely there's great chemistry, and all the very side characters. You have very interesting characters like Sam and Andy, and then Jason Stackhouse, and of course the infamous, or more or less not really infamous, but amazing Lafayette character, which I definitely would have to say is hands down one of the greatest characters HBO ever developed, and probably has to be on a top 100 list of greatest TV characters. He is that awesome. It is fucking awesome. And also its villainry. We got a lot of really cool villains throughout the series. Every single series, or at least every single season within the series, definitely followed a very specific trend, which is obviously the main triangle between the characters of Eric, Bill Compton, and Sookie Stackhouse. But of course they went on in various adventures taking on villains, which handled the vampires, vampire society, villainous vampires, witchcraft, various other supernatural beings like werewolves and werepeople, and various other shapeshifter characters, but mostly just vampires. And I think, at least looking back at it in retrospect, the great thing about the series is that it gave, when you don't have context with the show, you think of it in terms of how I put it in the earlier half of this review, which is, it's just fan service, it's just tits and ass and guy ass, and there's more bush, but a lot of tits and ass. It's not really all that. I think the great thing that this show gave, and maybe it has a lot to do with what HBO kind of put in there in the creators, which was context. It gave context to the vampires and their existence within this world, and it centered around a base where it could make sense where characters and people would act in this specific way, which I feel is where the brilliance of True Blood kind of lies, because when you look at it without this context, you kind of look at True Blood like every other person who looks at True Blood who's never really watched the series, which is, oh, that loser HBO show that ran way too long. Now granted, I will say, like a lot of shows, you lose the continuity, you lose not really continuity, more or less consistency, and the ability to stay consistent and great all throughout these seasons. However, True Blood, regardless of whether or not there was a devalue in quality, you can never say that it never had true inspiration and ideologies, which had to do with the vampire history. I think the grand thing is that they used vampires and various other werepeople the same way they do with people in real life, which is vampires are essentially various different races within our life, or homosexuality, various sexes, and they use drugs and political values and religion and faith and various other kind of ideologies like this within vampires and other supernatural creatures, and they're the basis of what today's politics and religion stands for in the country, which I thought was a very interesting aspect to go on within the vampire society and how they came out of the coffin, so to speak, which was really cool. With that being said, once again, everything else really cool. I love the actors. I love the characters. Alexander Skarsgård as Eric Northman obviously was a very in-depth, very developed character. Bill Compton was very interesting. I will definitely say that if there's something that does definitely lie around the negatives, it has to be within the two protagonist characters within Suki Stackhouse and Bill Compton, which is obviously, when you have a character, or at least characters that are based around a soap opera kind of esque storytelling, and then you change that narrative, characters like that become very dull. You know, and that very much lies within Anna Paquin and Stephen Moyer's character. Even though they're interesting to watch, they're definitely great looking and cool to look at having sex, and they definitely had very much great chemistry in and outside of the camera, but at the end of the day, their characters definitely became very dull and definitely lost their substance throughout the series run. I would say that if there's definitely a peak and a decline within quality within the series, is definitely once you reach season 3. The first 3 seasons are pretty phenomenal and follow very interesting themes and ideologies and various other societies in the supernatural world, where it be werewolves or witchcraft. But once you reach season 4 and move forward, very similar to my review on Dexter, it's kind of like once you reach the John Lithgow season, you must really come to a screeching halt and consider yourself some specific options, which is, should I go on with this series, or should I just stop right here? And that's where season 4 comes on. And it has a lot to do with these two specific characters, because Anna Paquin's character and Stephen Moyer's character lose their relationship, and you kind of find out it's all based on false pretenses, and then it kind of goes off on various other stages, and of course they end up banging other people, which of course happens in relationships, whatever. It's a relationship status quo. It happens with TV shows, especially in the romance genre. However, that pretty much destroys the narrative of what the show kind of stands for, which is a very self-aware, stupid, slapsticky kind of horror show, fantasy, romance, mystery, and then becomes a very overly pretentious and serious show. And that's where these characters kind of fall off the brink, or at least fall off the brink of like how much I care about them once you reach these specific seasons. And that has nothing to do with the performances, it just really has to do with the story and the writing of where the creators kind of led these characters in, which is my major negative with the show. However, at least the show gave us another goofy, stupid name pronunciation that we can add upon the top list of stupid name pronunciation, and that's of course the Bill Compton Suki.
Suki. Suki. Suki. Suki.
Suki.
Suki. Suki. Suki. Suki. Suki.
Suki. Suki Stackhouse. Suki.
Suki. Suki.
Suki.
Suki.
Suki. It's oh my god. It's like it's like Rick from The Walking Dead. It's
Carl! 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 Carl!
At this point in time, every stupid name pronunciation a actor's gonna do, it just sounds like the velociraptors from Jurassic Park. It's just nonsense at this point in time. It's very goofy, but what are you gonna do? But disregarding my shitty ass impressions to the wayside, overall, True Blood, it was a very good show with a lot of really cool actors and character actors, and it definitely has a lot to do with, I guess, the popularity with those specific actors. Anna Paquin and Stephen Moyer, even though in my personal subjective opinion, they kind of dropped off from being very interesting lead characters. They had a great surrounding basis, and once again, that has a very specific gray line because it does lie in with my negatives, which is the focus on vampires, and I guess the misdirect within the focus on vampires. You have so many other actors and storylines going on, you don't have time to go in depth and fulfill every single story justice, which is very much has to do with Joe's character and the Werewolf Society and how they kind of work together, which was interesting. Which, granted, I'm a hardcore werewolf guy. I love werewolves. I mean, as much as I like vampires and various other creatures and monsters of supernatural stock, I do like more or less werewolves more, and it does kind of bother me that werewolves, once again, in this specific continuity, is also just the bitches of the vampires. I mean, come on, let's be real. Can we stop with the werewolves being bitches to vampires? Can we stop that shit already? It's annoying at this point, but disregarding that shit as well, everybody else is so freaking solid. I mean, Lafayette, as I previously stated, hands down one of the best characters in all of HBO history. You have characters like Jason Stackhouse. Actor Ryan portrayed him so perfectly to the point where his stupidity is like watching a classic silent actor done again today. It's just so good to watch someone be so stupid and lovable that I wish we could have had a whole show just based around him. Kind of similar to how much I love, like, Doofy within the Scary Movie franchise. Like, they could have based an entire franchise around that because his stupidity was so beautiful and fun. And everybody else. I mean, Andy as a sheriff was awesome, this great cop, and not to mention the great actor who betrayed him, considering the fact that he is a part of HBO royalty, in my personal opinion, from his work from The Wire, and everybody else is just so good. And not to mention the greatest villain of all time, which is, of course, Dennis O'Hare's character. I've said this previously, I think in my Murder House review, which is Dennis O'Hare is a destroyer of an actor. He kills it. If you've not seen him in any possible American Horror Story review, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go check out any movie he's been a part of. Watch these seasons of American Horror Story. He is so solid and good, and he's pretty much the definitive villain within the whole True Blood storyline. He is so good, so menacing, so fun, so comedic and goofy, and so self-aware, which I love. And the accents are just wonderfully done.
Now time for the weather. Tiffany?
But with that being said, overall, True Blood, the TV series is great. I definitely would say that, very much like how I said with the Dexter review, that there does come a definitive line where quality ends up declining, and specific seasons aren't really holding up as much as others. And I say the first 4 seasons are definitely worth watching, and once you reach that point, the show definitely has a specific decline. And that has a lot to do with the main characters rather, which is the main love triangle between Eric, Bill, and Sookie. The major problem is that their storyline starts to decline, and every other storyline becomes more and more serious. The show bases itself on a soap opera, and then the narrative changes and becomes less self-aware and more or less a very serious, pretentious act where gods and, I mean, I'm just saying, like, let's be real here. This is not an anime. This is not a comic book story. This is a vampire soap opera, like, Dark Shadow shit. And, like, you make a story where halfway into the series, your telepathic waitress from Little Louisiana, Southern Louisiana, I might add, is freaking out of nowhere. You find out she's an alien half-breed human hybrid with light abilities. She's a fucking fairy. You find out she's a fucking fairy. I mean, like, once you're creating a story that's, once again, not an anime and or comic book genre, and slightly fantastical, but mostly just like a vampire romance story, and you make it that your character becomes a fairy with light powers, there's a shift in quality that's definitely declining in a specific rate. It's like the Titanic. It's going down very specifically in a very specific notion. But then again, there's a lot of fan service, so you kind of forgive it. I mean, like, there's sex, a lot of sex. I mean, like, there's a lot of Anna Paquin, and there's a lot of other guys who, I don't remember. There was just too much flesh. There was a lot of flesh all over. There's so much sex, I'm just saying. There's so much fucking sex. There's a lot of it. But whatever. Overall, True Blood, I loved it. I thought it was a really good series. I thought it was definitely interesting to review. And I did enjoy the series for when it lasted. I feel like, disregarding my major, I guess, nitpicks and negatives, the series was solid. It had very interesting characters, very cool stories, and the great thing is that within its fantasy mystery and, of course, all the comedy romance, it definitely took itself not too seriously once, of course, it reaches a certain point, and I loved that. I loved the fact that they were self-aware that this was stupid and it was just crazy to be a part of this life. I love that, and I fell in love with these characters. They were so good and so interesting and fun, and you just find love with them. And plus, come on, the blood effects. There's a lot of shows that, once again, when the horror genre kind of comes in, very specific and nitpicky when it comes to usage of blood. True Blood obviously knows how to use blood. Once again, it's a vampire show, so they have to, but it's a huge plus. But with all that being said and done, let's get into my final verdict of HBO's TV series True Blood, which has to be a solid 7 out of 10. It's a very good series. It's definitely above average and definitely worth watching this Halloween season. It definitely has my recommendation of a binge-worthy TV series you should be checking out this Halloween season. And seeing as how Halloween is lasting for at least another couple days as I'm recording and reviewing this TV series, I definitely suggest you should get up on it very quickly because there are 7 seasons and only a couple days left of this Halloween season. And then, again, I did say recommendation for, like, I don't know, the first 4 seasons, but overall, just do the whole thing. Just, if you want to see more fucking, you want to see Joe get naked again and fucking, you know, do stuff as a werewolf before he fucking kills it as Deathstroke, you check out the full seasons of True Blood. But disregarding any of that, my final verdict stands as a solid 7 out of 10. True Blood, HBO's True Blood, is definitely a binge-worthy TV series you should check out this October, this Halloween season. And with that being said, this is the end of my TV series review run. And of course, with that being said and done, check out my channel, comment below, and let me know what you personally think about my personal review for True Blood. And of course, with that being said and done, that's going to be it. Hopefully you enjoyed your Halloween season, and hopefully you enjoyed my recommendations for TV shows you should binge this season. But with that being said and done, shameless plug time. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jock12. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. And hope you guys enjoyed. And this has been Jock12.